You man, man?
I'm big dog, not little dog.
You're big dog? Damn!
He said I'm big dog.
He said big dog?
Yeah, look, bro.
So in this video today, I'm going to be showing y'all how I took my client from this to this. As a beginner barber, I'm going to be showing y'all how I do a full haircut and beard with a textured cut on the top. So if that's something y'all are interested in, stick around. We're going to get right to it.
Can I take a picture of that picture you showed me as well?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, a little longer on the sides. A little longer on the sides. Headers and off-road fabrication. Oh, nice.
If at any point throughout this video you're wondering what I'm using, whether that be the camera, whether that be, you know, the tools that I'm using, anything that I'm using, everything is linked down below in the description. So if you're curious, go down below to the description. You can find everything that you need down there. All right, so as y'all can see, I took them through the whole consultation process. And if y'all want to see what my consultation process is like, I can make a separate video on that. I've showed it in the past. I didn't really show it all in this video because I didn't plan on making this video. It was kind of spur of the moment. But I asked tons of questions. You know, as you can see, I asked him to show me a picture. I always take a picture of the picture they show me. That way, if I need to look at it for reference throughout the haircut, I can. So obviously, first thing we're going to do, well, I guess not obviously, but how I start my process is if we're cutting the hair on top, that's where I start at. So we're wetting down the hair, getting it nice and saturated, and getting it combed in a forward direction. And where I like to start at is I will pull the hair up in the front, as you can see, and this is something I learned from Jerry. This makes it a whole lot easier to know how much we want to take off the top instead of just guessing, because sometimes clients don't know the difference between an inch, a quarter of an inch, and 4 inches. You know what I'm saying? So I just pull the hair up in the front and I just tell them to let me know when it looks like a good amount that we want to cut. So as you can see, he wanted to cut, you know, a pretty decent amount. So, you know, where he said we were good at, I made that first incision. And after doing that, we're going to comb the hair back down and we're going to make a section right down the middle, and we'll pull that up vertically, and I'll go all the way down the middle of the head. And that will be my first guideline to the length that we're going to be putting in on the top. So now that we are done with that, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to section the top from the sides, just so we can make sure that we're only cutting the hair on top. We don't want to cut any of the hair on the sides yet. I'm going to save that for the next part of the process. So now that we have it all separated, sort of in a horseshoe type manner, I'm going to be pulling the hair up, and we're just going to be matching the hair on each side with that guideline down the middle. And now that we're done with that, I'm going to be cutting the hair on the sides. What I'm doing here, I learned from the Josh OP formula. And basically, I'm taking my fingers all the way to the side of his head, and I'm making that first incision right there. That's going to be pretty much right in line with the foreguard. And as we go towards the back, we're going to be removing our fingers from the head little by little. That way we can create that natural slope down in towards the back and towards that occipital bone area. We don't want to make it all the way even around the top. That's not gonna form to the head, you know, in the best manner. You know, it's not gonna look as good as if we create that natural slope in the back. Just going with the natural shape of the head. Now that we have that complete, you'll see that I'm just checking in the mirror to make sure both sides are even. And this is something I do quite often, whether it's in the fading process or the cutting process, just to make sure everything is consistent and looks the same on both sides. So now that we completed that, I'm going to be splitting the hair down the middle, and basically I'm just gonna look for where the hair naturally wants to split down the middle. If there is, you know, a natural split in the hair, if there is some natural separation. If not, we will create one pretty much right in the middle. But if there is a natural separation, wherever I see that, I will just go with where the hair wants to go. I won't force it to do something it doesn't want to do. So as you can see, we split the hair down the middle to each side, and we're just going to be pulling the hair to each side to that guideline we created when cutting the hair on the sides. So when working with the hair in the front of the head, in the fringe area, we want to kind of over direct that. That way we're able to keep that part of the hair a little longer than the rest. So we'll just use that guideline to go all the way around the head and even the top with the sides. And now that we're done with that, generally if you start by doing the hair on the sides, you would pull the hair up right here and you would have a guideline on each side, and you would just cut the peak in the middle. But since I started on the top, we don't really have a peak. Everything is kind of where we need it already. And what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna point cut and add a bit of texture, because this is, like I said before, a textured cut. So we're gonna be adding a fair amount of texture in this cut, and I'll add a little bit here and I'll add a little bit at the end once the hair is dry. And since I want a lot of texture, you'll see that I'm taking a pretty big section of hair. I'm staying pretty low to the base of that hair, and I'm just cutting into it. I'm point cutting into it, trying to create as much texture as possible. So now that we're done with all that, I'm going to be drying off the hair. And it doesn't matter so much that we dry off the hair on top, but we want to make sure, at least for me, and if you're a beginner like myself, or not even just a beginner, but it makes cutting the hair with the clippers so much easier if we make sure that the hair is super dry. You know, we don't want any sort of moisture on the sides of the head or in the back of the head, wherever we're going to be taking that clipper. And right here to start, like I said before, we're going to be starting with the foreguard, and we're going to be going right up into the work that we already did. We're not going to be taking off any of the work that we did with the shears, but we're just going to be going right up into it, just pretty much the same as if you would have done a 5 guard right before that. And don't worry, the view that I give you all will get a lot better once we start the fading process. And with the foreguard, we're not digging in to the side of the head at all. We're just going straight up off the top, and you'll be able to see once we come to the other side of the head kind of how I do that. And if you did it correctly, it should blend in pretty seamlessly with that foreguard. And if it's not perfect, as you can see, it's a little heavy right there on the side at that parietal ridge area. That's okay. It doesn't need to be perfect right now. We're gonna come back and soften that up at the end. So as you can see, I'm just using that comb to feed the hair into the guard. This just makes your work a lot cleaner as opposed to not using the comb, because you'll see when you try to, you know, take that clipper up into the hair isn't necessarily going to stay in one place. It's going to move all over the place. So when you take that comb and kind of just guide the hair into the clipper, it makes your job a whole lot easier. And as you can see, we're looking in the mirror, always making sure to, you know, check the work that we're doing, making sure that it's looking how we want it to look. And we're just stacking guards here. Like I said, we started with the 4, we're gonna go to the 3, then we're gonna go to the 2, and that's usually where I will stop and I will start my fading process. And all of these guards are gonna be closed. With the 2, I will open it up a little bit right around that 3 area, but generally I will keep that 2 guard closed as well. And everything is going straight up and down. We're not digging into anything. We're staying super light, as you can see with the pressure on the head. We're going a little bit tighter to the head at the bottom when we start, but as we go closer up to the previous guard that we put in, we're just going to be coming right up off the side of the head. We don't have to do a crazy flick out motion. As long as we are coming up off the side of the head, it's the same idea that we're doing with the shaver and the trimmer. As you'll see once we get to the fading portion of the video, we just loosen up on the pressure on the head and we come right up off of the head with it. And if you do it correctly, you should create a nice, soft, and smooth transition. And excuse the voice. I don't know if y'all can hear it. You probably can, but your boy's a little congested. I'm just getting over this flu or cold or whatever it is that I had, sinus infection, I don't know, but we still gotta, we still gotta get to it. But anyways, as you can see, we took the hair off the client, and we want to make sure throughout the haircut process we don't spend too much time on things that we don't necessarily need to be doing, but at the same time we want to make sure that our client is as comfortable as possible and that our canvas is as clean as possible, so we can see the work that we need to do, and we keep everything clean. We want to keep everything clean as we are working. So as you can see, I'm combing down the beard, and what I like to do is, well, first of all, when doing the beard, I'm just going to be creating that nice, square shape, kind of the same idea as we do with the hair on top. As you can see, I'm just going with the shape of his face, straight down. We're not creating any sort of curve. I'm just combing that hair out, and we're going to do that several times, and any hairs that are sticking out, I'm just going straight down with that shape. And to create the most efficiency and do our job in the most effective way that we can, what I like to do is I like to complete every task that I can when I have a certain tool in hand. So as you can see, we're going to be starting the fading process, and how I start my fading process is with the clipper closed. So since I have that clipper in hand, I'm going to be thinking of everything that I need to do with that clipper while I have it in my hand. So the first thing that I thought of is, let me shape the beard. That way we get that out of the way, and that checks one more thing off the box on the list of things that we need to do in this haircut, creating more efficiency and less time that it's going to take you to complete this haircut. So as you can see, while I'm there on the beard, I decided to pick up the trimmer, and that's not the most effective. I could have waited till I picked up the trimmer later in the haircut, but we're not perfect, so y'all are seeing that live. If I'm being honest, I could have saved this for later when I picked up the trimmer at that part of the process, but we're doing the mustache. And basically how I like to do things, I like to keep things super natural, and I like to use the shapes that I'm given on any specific client. So I'm just going with the shape of his lip. I'm not trying to create any sort of different lines or any sort of different shapes. Whatever shapes I'm given, that's what I use to create, the look that we're going for. So as you can see, we lined up the bottom of the mustache, we shaped the beard a little bit, and now we are starting the fading portion of the haircut. And basically what I do is I start with the clipper closed, and don't worry, like I said, we're gonna get a nice view of what I'm doing in just a second. But I like to start with the clipper because it just creates a softer guideline for me, instead of punching it in with the trimmer and then having to go back with the trimmer again and take that guideline out. I don't feel like I need to do that. I could just put that guideline in with the clipper. It creates a much softer guideline for me and makes my job a whole lot easier when it comes to taking that guideline out. So for the mid fade that we're doing, I'm going to be starting that guideline right around where the end of his eyebrow is at. And we always want to have reference points. That way we can make things consistent and even on both sides and make our jobs a lot easier. Everything that I do, I try to, just make my job a lot easier. And as you heard me say that several times in this video already, people's, eyebrows or whatever it is, anything that you're using as reference, it's not going to be perfect. They're not always going to be at the same points on whatever part of the face, that you're using them. So we'll use that as a general guideline, but then as you'll see, I'll kind of go in the front of my client and I'll just check to make sure that it's looking even on both sides. And if it's not, I'll, do what I need to do to make both sides even. And if it is, then we'll continue on to the next step. As you can see, we are taking that trimmer and we're just removing that bulk. We're not going any higher than where that bulk is at because we don't want to create another harsh guideline and go too much into that work that we already did with the clipper. So now that we got that out of the way, we're going in with the shaver and it's going to be the same idea. We don't really have a guideline there, and there is some things that you can do to create a slight guideline. And if you want to see that, just go watch Faded Culture videos. They have a pretty dope way of creating a guideline for you there. For me, I just keep kind of the general area of where I stopped in my head. And I just make sure not to go past that. So I keep that visual in my head and I'm creating a little bit of pressure towards the bottom with that shaver. And as I come up towards that general area that I remember where I left off with the trimmer, I'll be lightening up with the pressure and I'll just be coming up off of the head with that shaver. Pretty much the same idea that we're doing with the clipper and everything else. All right, so now that we have all that out of the way, finally, as I said before, now we can give you guys a good view of what I'm doing. And we're starting off with the beard since I do have that clipper in my hand. I'm just gonna be fading out the top of the beard there. Usually, depending on the beard and the thickness of the beard and how long it is, I could generally do what I need to do with that clipper open to closed, depending on how much, blend they want in it. Sometimes I'll grab that one guard and I'll just kind of maneuver it and do what I need to do. But as you can see, we got the top of that beard faded and we're starting our first guideline with the clipper open. What people like to call the open section. I like to create about a 1/2 inch guideline. That's generally what I do for most haircuts, unless it's a super compressed haircut. Sometimes for higher fades, I will stretch that out just a bit. But for the most part, it's gonna be the same width of your finger. So as you hear everybody say, if you place your finger on the side of your client's head, that's how much up you're gonna be going. That's about a 1/2 inch. And everybody's finger thickness is different, but generally it's gonna be around that same amount. So as you can see, we're keeping it super consistent. I start off on the side there, and then I will take it to the back, but I won't go all the way around. I've tried that before. It doesn't work out the best for me. A lot of times it's come out uneven. So for me, I found the best way is to just do one side at a time. And then I take it not all the way to the middle of the back, but pretty much to the middle of the back. And then I'll go to the other side and I'll just connect the two sides together. And it's gonna be that same up and down motion, a little bit of pressure at the bottom, less pressure towards the top. Not a crazy flick out motion, but we are coming up off of the head just a bit. We don't want to create too harsh of a guideline because that's just going to make our job that much more difficult when going to the next part of the process and trying to take out that guideline. And I like to keep the clipper blade pretty flat on the head. In my experience, that has allowed me to create the most consistent cut. And I like to take out the guidelines as I put them in. I don't like to save it towards the end. It just makes my job a little bit easier. You could put every single guideline in, the open section, the one open, the two, so on and so forth, and then go down from there. I like to just take them out as I put them in. So as you can see, that's exactly what I'm doing. Usually I could do this in 2 steps, maybe 3, once we get towards the back and for thicker, more coarse hair. But generally, I will just, start with that clipper closed. Unless the hair is super thick, since we did start with the clipper closed in the beginning, sometimes I can start with it a quarter of the way open and remove, you know, that first part of the guideline, the bottom of it, especially towards the front of the head. But a lot of times you will have to remove that with the same thing that you put it in with. So most times I'll just start with the clipper closed and I'll just flick it out. I won't go too high into that guideline, but you do have to go a little bit into it. You can't be scared to go into that guideline, you know, with the clipper closed. And then I'll open up the clipper halfway, and usually I'll be able to remove the rest of that guideline with the clipper halfway. I won't really have to do much else after that. As you can see, I don't know if you can notice, but I'm only using the corner of the blade. Sometimes in the back, I'll sort of use it, but not really. For the most part, I'm just using the corner of that blade to make sure I'm staying super precise with what I'm doing. A lot of times when I've used the whole blade, it forces me to take off too much. All right, so now that we did that, we took it all the way around the head. We're gonna be coming in with that one guard. And a lot of times I will start with the one guard open. Sometimes I will start with the one guard closed, depending on the thickness of the client's hair. For the more, you know, thicker haired clients, that's when I'll use the one guard closed. So we're just creating that inch to half inch, somewhere in between, maybe 3/4 of an inch guideline with that one guard. Same motion, straight up and down, a little bit of pressure towards the bottom, light pressure towards the top. And once we set that in, if I didn't close the one guard already, I will close it and I'll just lighten up the very bottom of that guideline and a little more than just the bottom towards the back, just to make my job easier for the half guard part of the process that we're about to do after this. And as you can see, going in the front, making sure everything is even. I usually do that after every, you know, guideline that I put in, after every amount that I'm moving up within that fade, just to make sure we're staying consistent and even. And now we're gonna be getting that half guard. A lot of times I'll start with it 3/4 of the way open and I'll go 3/4 of the way up into that guideline. If the hair is thicker, I'll start with it halfway open. But just to play it safe, a lot of times I will start with it 3/4 of the way. I've noticed that all the way open doesn't really do much. So 3/4 of the way, you know, at least will soften it up even more than what the one guard closed did. Sometimes towards the front and on clients with thinner hair, you can remove that guideline with the half guard 3/4 of the way open. But a lot of times, and with this client here, we are gonna have to drop it. And more towards the back, we will close that lever all the way, you know, trying not to come up too much into it. And as you can see, still using the corners of the blade. Really the only guards that I'm using the full blade is with that 4 down to the 2, and sometimes the 1.5, and sometimes the 1 guard. But for everything under that 1 guard, for sure, I'm only using the corner of the blade. I'm never really using that full blade. Right, so now that we are done with that, I'm going to be grabbing the 2 guard. Sometimes I'll grab the 1.5 and I'll just go straight into that. But most times I will grab that 2 guard open and I will just go up into the work that we've done on top. Just lightening it up, not trying to create another guideline, but just softening that section up, getting it ready so we can take out that last guideline with the 1.5 guard. So I'll start with the 2 guard open. I'll take it all the way around the head, and then I'll close that 2 guard, and I'll do the same thing I did with the 1 guard open and the 1 guard closed, basically. And then I'll close it, and I'll stay more towards the bottom of that section, just softening it up a little bit more for the work we're gonna do with the 1.5. All right, so now we have that 1.5 guard, and I'll start with that all the way open. And a lot of times I'm using mainly just the corner of the blade with this one as well. And I'll kind of, for me, I've noticed that using it in sort of a sweeping motion has worked best for me. Sometimes I'll use the full blade if I feel like I need to, and I'll just, you know, kind of freehand it a little bit into the work that we've already done. That can be a bit tricky. You can get yourself into trouble with that. You just want to make sure that, you know, you are not digging into it at all. If you do any sort of, you know, going into the work you're doing on top, definitely just using the corner of the blade with that and kind of like a sweeping motion. You don't have to go super fast. I've found that, you know, slower, more precise motions tend to work better for me. And with the 1.5 guard open, it's never really gonna fully remove, you know, that guideline that you have set in, at least not for me. I'll always have to close up the 1.5 guard all the way. And sometimes that won't even fully get it out. So we'll go with the 1.5 guard open, lighten up the work that we did, and then we'll close the 1.5 guard. And with the corner of the blade, we will remove as much of that guideline as we can. All right, so as I mentioned, never really get out that full guideline with that 1.5. So we're gonna be slapping on that 1 guard, and I'll usually start with it all the way open or 3/4 of the way open, and just using the corner once again. I'm just gonna be removing the rest of that guideline we couldn't get out with the 1.5 guard. And with this 1 guard, you're gonna have to play with the lever a little bit. At least that's what I've had to do from my experience. From all the way open, sometimes in the back, to all the way closed. But you want to be super careful if you do close it up all the way, because like I said before, you could very easily mess up the work that you already did. Whenever I do close it up all the way, I'm making sure to take my time. I'm just using the corners, and I'm just tapping at whatever I can't remove, you know, with the other parts of the lever that I've used. And if I can't fully get that out, then I won't force it. You know, sometimes I'll remove that 1 guard and I'll turn, you know, the blade, as you'll see in a second, I'll turn it all the way to the side, and I'll just use that corner to kind of dig into that and kind of try to create some separation. The same thing that you could do with the scissors, you know, point cutting at whatever guidelines that are still in there. It's gonna be the same idea. And so now that we're done with that, a lot of times what I'll do here during the detailing portion of my process is I'll just slap back on the highest guard that I use, which is the 4 guard in this instance, and I'll go down from there. So as you can see, I'm just going up off the side of the head with that 4 guard. But as you'll see right now, another thing that I'll do oftentimes, especially when we have a lot of weight on the sides, is I'll go ahead and grab those shears. And as you can see, that's exactly what I'm about to do. I'm gonna grab the shears and I'll kind of just create kind of diagonal guidelines, as you can see, and there's gonna be a peak, and you just want to cut off that peak, as you can see I'm doing here. You don't want to be too blunt with it. I'm point cutting it because, like I said, this is a textured cut, so we don't need it to be super perfect. But a lot of times you can just cut this bluntly as well. But doing it like this, you know, for me, makes things way easier, and it creates a much softer transition because you just pull the hair off the side of the head, and whatever peak you see, you just remove it. For me, every time that I've done this to remove the weight that I don't want, it's always worked out pretty well and created that soft transition that I'm going for, as opposed to doing clipper over comb, as opposed to doing you know, shear over comb or using the thinning shears. I try to limit the amount that I use the thinning shears. I will use them sometimes. As you'll see, I'm going to use them in this, you know, with this cut. But doing it like this, I feel like is the best way. And for me, as you can see, it's giving me that soft transition and that look that I'm going for. So I'll just do this all the way around the head, making sure not to take off too much, but any peak that you see, as you've seen there, you'll just connect the bottom to the top and take out that peak in the middle. As you can see, once you're done with that, you could go up even higher into the top if you feel like you need to. But up there, I'm just, you know, for what I'm doing, I'm just adding a bit more texture up there and creating that softer transition. And as you can see, we pretty much got the look that we're going for. We're still gonna refine it a little bit more. And as you can see, that's when I'm bringing in the thinning shears, because I don't have too much work that I need to do. You know, you don't want to do that first and try to like go crazy with the thinning shears. You know, it's not going to look very good as it grows back, because there's going to be parts that are super thin and super frail, more than there needs to be. So as you can see, this is just for detailing. It's not to create that whole blend. It's just to detail and, you know, take out any sort of imperfections that you see. And now, as you can see, now that we've completed that, pretty much gonna be finishing where we started off before getting the shears. I got that foreguard, and I'm making sure not to go into that work we just did. I don't want to ruin any of that work that I just put in. I'm just gonna be taking the foreguard right up to it, and then I'm gonna be going to the 3 guard, going to the 2 guard, going to the 1.5, going to the 1, you know, just making sure to soften it up each step of the way. And as you'll see, you know, as we go along that process, it'll get softer, the blend will get smoother. And that's just the way that I found that works best for me, as opposed to kind of guessing where you need to go in with the clippers. Now that we're done with that, we're gonna be getting into the beard, but first we just wanna make sure that the client is fully cleaned off, that there's not too much hair. And now, once again, I'm just gonna be combing the beard out and shaping it, making sure that we have the shape that we're going for. That's something that you'll have to do several times, just because the hair moves around. And what I like to do is I like to make sure my client is as comfortable as possible. I don't like to make them leave their chin up for too long. So I'll take him back, as you'll see in a second. I guess I figured that I would put in the outline around the edges first, because I am going to be using the razor while he's leaning back in the chair. So I remembered that I should, you know, do that edge up first. And we're just creating this super natural arch in that C-cup area. I usually like to start at the top, and then I'll connect it at the bottom. And as you see, I'll just create that nice little shape, going with the natural shape that's already given to me. I'm not going to be cutting into it more than I need to. Some clients, you do have to get a little more cosmetic, but I want to limit that as much as possible. And now, as you can see, we're going to be taking the client back in the chair, and we are going to be completing the rest of that beard. And where I like to start is I like to start with the bottom of the beard. And as you'll see, I'm going to ask him here, you know, just to confirm how he likes his beard, because some clients, they like their beard a little more full. Some clients, they like it to be a little sharper. So I just wanted to make sure with him, you know, how he liked it done, just so we can make sure we give him exactly what he's going for. And he did say that he likes it to be a little more sharp on the bottom. So I'm just showing him here, you know, the shapes that we could give him. And he says, you know, he does want it to slope up towards the top of that jawline area a little more, as opposed to keeping it, you know, just more straight. So we're starting off there right in the middle. And for the most part, we're going to be creating a straight line to each side of that jawline. And this is going to be the guideline for the work we're going to do with the clippers in a second, creating the shape that we're going to be giving him. And what we did on one side is going to be the same exact thing we're doing on the other side. You just want to make sure that you're super careful with your trimmers here. You can have 2 trimmers, one that's not as zero gap, that you use in the more sensitive areas for your clients. For me, I just make sure not to use the blade too flat, so I don't cut them, and I'm using very light pressure. I'm just tapping at that line, because we don't need to dig into the skin at all to create what we're going for. Now that we have that complete, I'm just combing it out once again. We'll do this several times, because like I said, the hair does move around. So you want to do this to make sure you get, you know, every hair that you need to get. And we're just going to be going back and cleaning everything up, making sure it's exactly how we want it to be. And now that we have that set in, grabbing the comb one more time, brushing out the hair, because we're going to be creating the shape on the bottom of the beard. And basically what I like to do is I'm not taking off much of that length. I'll just get whatever stragglers I see, and I'm just trying to keep the clipper level with the shape that I'm trying to create. And you really just have to visualize that shape in your head. If you're going for a more straight look, just keep the clippers straight all the way down to the neck. If you're going for a little more of that sloped look, then obviously you're gonna have to take it in a little bit as you get closer to that neck. When we got that shape that we're going for, we're just gonna go in on the sides and kind of refine the work that we did in the beginning of the video. And don't be afraid to get that clipper, you know, up to those hairs. Also make sure that you're being super safe as well. But I've been doing my own beard for so long, you know, that this kind of came more natural to me just because I was more used to it. But as long as you're keeping that clipper flat and you're not curving it at all, you should, you're gonna be good. Just make sure not to curve the clipper, go straight down. Right, now that we completed all that, we got the shape that we're going for. I am getting the straight razor, and I like to do dry shaves. I find that I get the cleanest work with that. It's, the closest shave whenever I use any sort of shaving gel or anything like that. I mean, for me, it's more difficult. It doesn't create as clean of a shave. And like I said, I've been doing this on myself for so long. I just find that I get the best results and the least irritation, to be totally honest. I can see exactly what I want to do. I don't have any sort of, I don't know. Shaving gel it doesn't give me the finish that I like. This gives me a cleaner finish. It allows me to create those ash lines. Basically what I like to do is I'll start at the very bottom of that beard, and once again, keeping it as natural as possible. Wherever I see that it ends at a solid area to where we're not digging into it too much, but also there's enough hair there to create a solid line on that cheek area, that's where I'll start. And I'll kind of pull the cheek skin up a little bit, not too much. I don't want to create a crazy curve, but I'll pull it up a little bit, and I'll just follow that straight line to the top. And now going to the sidebar, the C-cup area, I like to go against the grain here, because if there is any amount that you had to go into that hairline, you want to remove as much hair as possible. That way it could last as long as possible. You don't want them to walk out the next day they already got regrowth and it's not looking clean anymore. So I remove as much hair as possible. I find that it gives it the cleanest look, so I go against the grain here. And as you can see, we completed all of the razor work. Client's looking good. We're just gonna, brush everything into place. I'm gonna look it over, go from different angles, different lighting, clean off the client, and, just make sure everything is looking how I want it to look. If I see anything that I don't like, as you can see here, I wasn't, all the way pleased with the shape of the beard. So I'm gonna go back in and I'm just going to clean up the work that I already did.
Work on it. What do you have to do at school?
Change anything at all?
To play.
Cool, looks good. I left more on the sides like you wanted. For sure, I appreciate it. How about the front? Do you like the length on it and everything?
Yeah, I'm pretty happy with the length in the front.
Do you want anything in there, any product to kind of see how the style?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, if you wanna put something in there.
Yeah.
And as you can see here, we're just putting the finishing touches now, adding the rest of that texture. Same thing, you could add a little more texture when it's dry, so that's why I did a little bit in the beginning and then I did the rest right here. Just taking pretty big sections and staying pretty deep towards the base of the head and just point cutting into it. And we're trying to add a lot of texture, so we're not gonna be shy about the way that we're point cutting here.
Probably would need like a clay to go for that look that was in that picture. But you could almost get it just with this alone. I mean, do you put your hair up, or you kind of just keep it in your face a little? I mostly comb it off on the side. Oh, okay. So kind of like. Exactly. Yeah. Looks good. Yeah, I like it, dude. Alright, dude, I'm happy with it.
So as you can see, here's the finished product. I do have to say myself, I love the way that this came out. Drop a comment down below. Let me know what y'all think of the process. Let me know what y'all think of the finished result. Let me know what y'all want to see next, man. Give me your thoughts, ideas, and your criticism, whatever you want down below. All links are down below in the description, man. I appreciate y'all. And here we are.
Change? Thank you, brother.
Stop.
Let me,
I'd give you more.
I barely even touched
bro.
it.
Every 3 people that you send in, you
Yeah,
can get a free
my
haircut.
Oh,
And then they can get a free haircut as well. And I'll send you that video right now.
For sure, man, dude.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
Good meeting you, bro.
You as well. You're gonna stay still. I know it's hard with all that energy.
I need how you feel.
Relax, really. Acabamos later.
Man,
Later, bro.
See you later, little man.
Later.
I'm big dog, not little
You're
man.
big dog? Damn!
He said I'm big dog.
He said big dog?
Yeah, look, bro.
I'm big dog, bro, homie.
Big dog. See you later, big dog.
Oh, you're big dog.